So coming back to, we've all had our histories. Everybody up there's had a few hairy moments somewhere back in time. And how you think about those past moments is probably the really key thing affecting you in the present.
That's true. When people come to me with confidence issues, I always ask them, first of all, before our first session, to make a list of all the scary things that have happened to them since they started riding. Of course, lots of people say, well, we can't possibly do that, it will be a book. But usually it's not. It's at the most 3 or 4 pages, but usually half a dozen incidents that are very clearly in their mind. And they begin to see, it actually helps them, because sometimes people come to me and say, well, I've got an irrational fear, I don't understand it, there's no reason I should have it. But when they start to look at what's happened through their riding career, they'll actually begin to realise that it makes sense. Because I absolutely believe that humans are not irrational in that way. All behaviour has a purpose, and lacking confidence, being nervous or fearful, is actually the mind-body system's way of protecting itself. I think its view is that if this isn't safe, let's be scared, it will stop it happening. And what we need to do is convince the whole system that actually it's much safer to be both confident and competent.
Yes, and that's undoubtedly true, isn't it? Because self-fulfilling prophecies happen so much. From the what if we stop at the jump, I think he's going to stop at the jump, and lo and behold, he does stop at the jump, to all the little things where people stop riding, stop processing, stop breathing, start bracing, get disorganised. So undoubtedly, being a more confident, competent rider is more likely to create the outcomes you want. So you have the idea as well, don't you, of each rider's barrel of tolerance. I think this is a wonderful idea.
Yes, this actually comes from a paediatrician who worked with children with allergies and talked about having a barrel of tolerance. And if a child had an allergic reaction, it occupied part of that barrel. But I think it applies just as much to emotional issues as well. And if somebody has a traumatic experience, it's as though it takes away some of the tolerance. It actually begins to fill up the barrel. So we all have to have some tolerance for trauma, for difficulties, because life's like that. Stuff happens, and we have to be able to deal with it. But as too many things happen, and the problem is with riding is that, you know, there will be instances when people are scared of one thing or another. It begins to occupy the barrel and then can take it right to the top, so that, especially if people have had a few falls or whatever, and then perhaps a small incident will happen and people will suddenly say, well, I've lost my confidence, I don't know why.
Yes, so that's a kind of straw that broke the camel's back, but essentially the barrel starts overflowing.
Absolutely.
And this will be essentially the same idea as American trainer Harry Whitney, another Western rider, who talks about the horse's anxiety cup. Yeah, that the horse has an anxiety cup, and once his anxiety cup is full and his cup runneth over, then his behaviour is going to get much more difficult to deal with and require a huge amount more skill from the rider.
Yes, my view of what I'm doing with people is that we're saying, well, let's look at what's happened in the past, let's look at what might be filling up that barrel, and let's drain it, basically.
Yes, so how you think about events and how you think about events that happened in the past, and do they feel like history or do they feel like actually they're activating you in the present? That's an absolute key, isn't it?
And we know that neuroscience backs us up with this, because there's some evidence that the mind, not necessarily consciously, quite often unconsciously, will hold images and sounds of things that have happened in the past and carry them around as though they're in the present. So even if somebody doesn't consciously recognise something, the system might well do that. So, for example, if somebody's had a fall at a jump with red and white poles, the mind may well have an image of red and white poles, not really in consciousness, and the person will go and do a round of show jumping. They'll see a fence of red and white poles, feel terribly scared, but have no idea why.
Yeah, so
it's quite common.
So the past is impinging on the present, and at that point the person really doesn't realise and really doesn't make the connection.
They often don't. And in fact, when